Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. But we're changing things up a little bit. Today will not be your typical Sports Talk Philadelphia episode, but don't you worry, we'll still be discussing all your favorite Philadelphia sports teams, but we'll be going over their best and worst seasons. So please stay tuned and let's get on to the episode. Hello everyone, I am your host Braden Knapp, and I'm here joined with a full panel here today. Here on my left, Tyler Farmer. How are we doing?
Doing good, Braden.
Awesome. Going down here, Tyler Wader. What's up?
Doing great. How you doing?
Awesome. Going down here, Chris Grest. What's up?
Everything's going good.
Perfect. So as I said earlier, today will be a little bit different episode, but we'll be still starting with the Eagles. But today we'll be first talking about their Super Bowl 52 winning team. So let's get into it. Philadelphia Eagles winning Super Bowl 52 team. They finished 13-3, the number one seed. The backup QB Nick Foles, as we know, took over for Carson Wentz and led the Eagles to their playoff run. The Eagles ran their infamous Philly special, as we all know and love here in Philly, Super Bowl 52, and it was their first Super Bowl in franchise history. Gentlemen, this was an incredible game. I know, going in there, beating Tom Brady. I mean, let's start with you, Tyler. What was your favorite thing about this game?
I think it was just the fact that the Eagles, this was their first championship. This has been at that point, it was a city that's kind of deprived of winning a championship for that football team at least. And, the Eagles, of course, Philadelphia as a whole loves their sports team, but the Eagles are their pride and joy. And at this point, fans were starving for them to win that first championship. And it seemed like that hope was lost when Carson Wentz went down, but Nick Foles pulled off one of the most impressive late season and playoff runs, and this was a season to remember for the Eagles.
It really was. Going down, Tyler, what build off that? How was the season to you?
Yeah, it was a lot of joy throughout the season. Ups and downs, obviously. Wentz went down that Rams game. Everybody kind of held their breath for a little bit, and I think we kind of limped in the playoffs a little bit, and then just that improbable playoff run, unbelievable. Nick Foles will be remembered forever, and like Tyler said, I mean, first Super Bowl in team history. This city is a city of football fans first, and we love our Eagles, and it was unbelievable.
It really was. Going over to you, Chris. What does this season mean to you? How important was this?
It meant everything as a diehard Eagles fan. First Super Bowl, it was, as the gentlemen have already said, the Eagles are the team's or the city's favorite team, and it was really encapsulated by this run. When Wentz went down, obviously, as you guys mentioned, it seemed like all hope was lost. But like Philly, the group of underdogs, and that was the motto for this team. You had Lane Johnson and Chris Long wearing the dog masks. But yeah, this meant a lot to me, and it was a special season for the Eagles.
It really was, and as I said earlier, they had the Philly special in that game. I know when I watched that for the first time, I pretty much lost my mind. So, Tyler, what was your reaction to watching that? Because I know it was just crazy.
First things first, I was like, when I saw that they were going for it, I was just like, oh my God, don't do this, bro. Just take the three and just go into halftime. But, and then you just see, I remember the play, Foles, he's slapping the guard on the, she's slapping the guard on the leg. You're trying to figure out what's going on. And the next thing you know, boom, he snaps the ball. And then it was like one of those things where like a whole lot happened in such a short amount of time. And then it was like, oh my God, there's no way. That's when I kind of knew, I'm like, yeah, this team's winning this game.
I mean, really, time almost seemed like it stopped when that play happened. I mean, honestly, I thought Foles was going to drop that. I don't know. Going you, Tyler, did you think it was going to happen, that play?
No, it was shock and awe. Like Tyler said, I mean, everyone's screaming. It's right before half. Just take the three. Take the three, go into the halftime, regroup and see where you're at. But, I mean, that almost like the A.J. Brown touchdown recently, that kind of changed, gave them momentum going into the half and kind of almost sealed their victory. Obviously, it was up and down in the second half, but yeah, that was unbelievable.
It really was. And just going back to what you said, even to the last Super Bowl, how A.J. Brown, that was the play that kind of changed things. And that Philly special really did change things. Going over to you, Chris, for this play, do you think there's anything that even comes close or tops that? Maybe Barkley jumping over backwards, but that wasn't in the Super Bowl. But, what do you think?
Yeah, other than that, I can't really think of another play that comes close. Barkley in the regular season, Doug Peterson on 4th down in the Super Bowl calls the most iconic play in Eagles history. There's a statue outside of the link now of, Doug Peterson saying to Foles saying to Peterson, you want Philly, Philly. Ran it to perfection. Shout out Trey Burton, longtime tight end that threw the pass. Special play, and it was even better because later in the game the Patriots tried one of their own throws, and of course Tom Brady dropped it, but that's neither here nor there. But one of the all-time plays in Eagles history and Philadelphia sports history as a whole.
It really was. And when that play happened, Chris, I'm so glad you brought that up because for a second there I thought, oh, here goes Tom Brady, best quarterback of all time, he's going to catch it. But he didn't. That was truly amazing. It was amazing to see that. But just hearing you guys talk, there were so many players on that team, so many great players on that team. But to you guys, I want to know your guys' favorite players, starting with you on that team.
I think one of my favorite players on that team was Malcolm Jenkins. He was really the enforcer of that team. He was really like one of the, if not the leaders on that team. Brandon Graham was also there as well. I think everyone remembers that hit he laid on Brandon Cooks in the Super Bowl, knocked him out cold. But Malcolm Jenkins, for me, not just because of his play on the field, but because the way he could galvanize players and the way he kept that locker room tight, especially after some of the injuries that the team faced that season to keep them going. I think he was my favorite player that year.
Malcolm Jenkins, he was amazing. Ty, what about you?
My favorite player from that team, without a doubt, for me was Zach Ertz. I love Zach Ertz. He caught the go-ahead and eventually winning touchdown in the game. I can't say enough about him. I think guys around this city and even the team that we have still, when we play him, still revere him, and he just had a huge impact on the team and the city.
He really did. I'm glad you mentioned him. Even though now, obviously, this season he was playing for the Commanders, it's still Zach Ertz. What he means to this city, what he's done for the city, is truly unbelievable. Going over to you, Chris, who was your favorite player in this season?
This is a bit of a dark horse pick, but I'm going to have to say Carson Wentz. Although he was hurt during the run, they don't get there without him. The guy was most likely going to win MVP, and it really stinks for how his career turned out because after the injury, as you guys all know, he was never the same player. He just backed up Mahomes in the Super Bowl. But that season, man, Carson Wentz had me thinking he was going to be Mahomes before Mahomes. He was the best player in the league. He made plays that you've never seen from an Eagles quarterback before and up to that point. So for me, it's Carson Wentz. And although Nick Foles finished the job, and Nick Foles is a legend, all respect to him, my favorite player from that team was Carson Wentz.
I'm glad you said that, Chris, because even though all the jokes, everything we love to make about Carson Wentz, we do have to give it to him. He really was playing like an MVP, and he set the foundation for that season. But unfortunately, we cannot talk about the good without talking about the bad. So we'll be talking about the Eagles' 2015 season. I know it's not our favorite topic, but we have to talk about it. They finished 7-9. Oof. They fired Chip Kelly, their head coach, before the season even ended. It marked their second straight season missing the playoffs. QB Nick Foles and running back LaShawn McCoy was traded the prior season and replaced by QB Sam Bradford, DeMarco Murray, and Kiko Alonso. Gentlemen, this was definitely a year, but looking back on it, this is a year that built upon maybe the 3 Super Bowl appearances, you could say. Tyler, what are your thoughts on this 2015 season?
I think so. I think that's kind of one way to look at it because, it led to them firing Chip Kelly and moving on to getting Doug Peterson, who did help bring that first Super Bowl to Philadelphia. But it was definitely a season where you just kind of the expectations going into that season and the way the team fell short was very disappointing.
Definitely, and Ty, you have something to add on to that?
I think, it's hard to fire a coach in the middle of the season, but it was the right move. And like Tyler said, getting Doug Peterson led this team to its first championship, and we will forever be grateful.
Definitely. Eternally grateful at 100%. Going over to you, Chris, there's a few interesting names in here. DeMarco Murray, Kiko Alonso. How do you feel about seeing those names again?
Man, not great, honestly, but I think it just, for that team, they gave Chip Kelly way too much power. You know, he made the trade, LaShawn McCoy for Kiko Alonso, brought in DeMarco Murray, cut Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin was let go. The big problem with that season was Kelly had way too much power, and it was just a rough year for the Eagles.
It really was, but they bounced back a little bit. But honestly, I know he wasn't the best of players, especially for the Eagles, but running back DeMarco Murray, he had a fun time in the NFL, if we can remember a little bit of the teams that he was on. I believe the Titans and the Cowboys too as well. I mean, he bounced around the league a little bit, but he was honestly a fun player to watch. But before we end up, I just want to go to you guys and say, was all these moves and was these trades, these had to happen for the Super Bowl? Or for the multiple Super Bowls, sorry.
I think so. Sometimes, you know, one of my favorite sayings, you guys spend money to make money. So I would say in the end it was worth it.
Definitely, and unfortunately that is all the time we have for the Eagles, but we'll be moving towards the Flyers. And let's talk about the Flyers 2009 season. It was a season marked by significant challenges, but remarkable achievements. They finished 41-35-6. They unfortunately lost in the Stanley Cups to the Blackhawks 4-2, but they came back in a crazy series to the Boston Bruins, who they were actually down 3-0 in the series, and they came back, and then also they're down 3-0 in the final game and came back to win that game. This was a crazy season, to say the least, but I mean, unfortunately they did not get it done, but it was still a successful season. Would you say, Chris?
Oh, absolutely. It's the best season. The Flyers haven't been back to the Cup since. Guys like Mike Richards, Chris Pronger, Jeff Carter, you know, really led the charge for this team. And as you mentioned, Braden, the game they came back in from 3-0 after also being down 3-0 in the series. One of the best individual hockey games I've ever seen. Obviously, as a Flyers fan, it made it 10 times better. Gagne scoring the goal to put them up 4-3. But yeah, even though they lost the Cup, it's still one of the best seasons the Flyers have ever had, and I look back on it fondly.
Going over to you, Ty, for this year, obviously it didn't win it, but how was it watching as a fan for you?
Very exciting. I do think, I'm not sure, I need to fact check, but I think they're the only team in hockey history to come back from 3-0. Not sure about that. The way they got in the playoffs, last game of the season, shootout against the Rangers. I think it was win and get in. So, I mean, it started even before the playoffs in that last game of the season. It was down to the wire, very exciting throughout the playoffs. They played some great teams. They went through the Devils, the Bruins, the Canadiens, and obviously lost to the Blackhawks in the finals. But it was one heck of a run.
It really was one heck of a run. And I know you guys mentioned some names earlier, but going back to you, Chris, who was someone that really stuck out to you that season?
Oh, absolutely. For me that season, it was Danny Briere, honestly. He's one of my all-time favorite Flyers. That season, he was, you know, as coming in as a winger, but he just brought so much energy, just very skilled player. Now, obviously, he's the GM of the team, gave us Michkov, which is setting us up well for the future. But my favorite player from that team is Danny Briere.
Man, going over to you, Ty. What about you? Who's your favorite player?
I mean, I have to say Danny Briere, too. I love Mike Richards and Jeff Carter, big fans of them before we moved on from them. But, I mean, Danny Briere, I think he's a fan favorite, and I think that's one of the reasons people in this city have faith in the future of this franchise, because he is in the front office now, and he played every game to his best. You know, he gave it his all, and I mean, that's when back in those years, those Flyer teams, Danny Briere was one of my favorites.
Definitely. But as I said earlier, we are still going to talk about not only the good teams but the bad teams. So we have to now get into the bad teams of the Flyers, which there's kind of been a good amount. But we're only going to talk about the 2006 season when they finished 22-48-12. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 1994. Their head coach, Ken Hitchcock, fired GM Bob Clark and stepped down. 2006 was a year, to say the least. Going over to you, Chris, what are your thoughts on this year?
Fortunately, I was very young when this season played out. I was 3 years old, so I don't have a great viewing of it, but from what I've looked at and what I've seen, you know, that team, it still had some guys that were inevitably on that team that got to the Cup. You know, they had Jeff Carter, they had Gagne, they had Richards, so the foundation was there, but the execution for the actual season, you know, one of the worst in the team's history. Hitchcock was fired middle of the way, or he was just fired. And yeah, overall, a very not great season for the Flyers, forgettable, and yeah, not nearly the same as the Stanley Cup season.
That is definitely true. And as I said, it was 2006 season, so most of us were very tiny. So it's probably a good thing that we do not remember that. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have for Flyers. But we'll be moving on to the 76ers, who they had even though right now they're in a little bit of a tough spot, they had a really good year at one point, and that is the 2001 season. That season, they went 56-26. They made it to the NBA Finals when they lost to the Lakers 4-1 in the series. But that team was carried by Allen Iverson, who averaged 31 points per game and also 2.5 steals, which I think is just crazy. With also their head coach, Larry Brown, won Coach of the Year. But also, shout out there, Mutombo also won Depoy, and Aaron Mitchie also got the Sixth Man of the Year. So even though they lost, it was still a very good year for the Sixers. Going to you, Tyler, what stood out to you about this year?
Got to be that AI step over. I mean, that's one of the most iconic just scenes that in Sixer history. Watching him do that, he was the heart and soul of that team. I think his talent and what he did was overshadowed by some of the other great players that were in the league at the time. I mean, going up against Shaq and Kobe at the time. It was a couple years after that, but LeBron, D. Wade, and those guys eventually entered the league. People forget how great Allen Iverson truly was.
I'm very glad you said that, because they're actually, his move, his crossover was banned until he got out of the league again, because he was just that dominant with it. I mean, people couldn't even defend him. Watching Allen Iverson was just amazing. I still love watching his highlights. Going over to you, Ty, I mean, I'm sure you love watching AI. What do you got to say about this?
I could talk all day about Iverson. I remember going on YouTube as a kid, just watching the same clip, Iverson top 10 best plays. Yeah, going off of Tyler, that whole game one of the finals, unbelievable. Nobody thought the Lakers were going to lose a game that entire postseason. That was the only, game one of the finals was the only game they lost. So to Iverson getting that team to where they did, I mean, he helped take them through Ray Allen and the Bucks, Vince Carter and the Raptors. One hell of a season, one heck of a game. I mean, I can't say enough.
I mean, it was awesome. As you said, they got through some really good teams, and it was not just AI. I don't want to say that, because obviously they had a lot of pieces around him, but AI really kind of put the team on the back and really got him there. Going over to you, Chris, what are your thoughts on the season?
Very, very similar to yours. Yeah, AI was definitely the focal point of that roster, MVP, 30 points a game. But yeah, there was, like, Mutombo he won Defensive Player of the Year. He was still a huge contributor to that team. You know, he was a big part in also helping get that one game. He was able to neutralize Shaq as much as you're going to neutralize that version of Shaquille O'Neal. But yeah, just a great team in Sixers history. Stinks that this is the farthest they've been in 24 years, but still look back at it greatly. AI, one of the best players in franchise history.
Definitely, and as you said earlier, as you just said, unfortunately, they have not been back to the finals since then. They've been close, had some close teams, but unfortunately, they have not been able to get back to there. Honestly, what do you kind of think, Tyler, to get back to that winning ways? What do you think the Sixers have to do to get back to their 0-1 winning ways?
Based on the way this team has looked, you know, hopefully every other team doesn't show up when they play the Sixers and the Sixers get free wins. I think that's the best route for them right now. But it's going to be one of those things. I mean, the Sixers are in a rough spot right now. You kind of don't. The problem with this team is there is no direction. You don't know where to go right now, and I think that is kind of what the scary part is through some of the struggles that this team has had as of recent.
Unfortunately, yeah. And going off of that, let's go into the 2015 season. Oh, that was a fun one, wasn't it? They finished 10-72. Oh my goodness. Joel Embiid missed the entire season due to injury. Real shocker there. So he set the record for the longest losing streak in NBA history in 28 games. But not just the 2015 season. I'm sure all Sixers fans remember, around just that whole time period, they were not very good, and they were kind of known for tanking for that #1 overall pick, because this is in a time where the draft lottery wasn't a thing, and you were getting players like Michael Carter-Williams. You're trying to draft. You got Norman Joel. Now you ended up getting Embiid out of it, so you got Embiid, but there were some tough times going over Utah. 10-72. There were some tough years in the Sixers. Want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just want to give thanks to Sam Hinkie. I think, I think we should have held on to him. But in all seriousness, no, it was a rough few years. Obviously, everybody knows it was a coined phrase, the process, just tanking. I mean, this was obviously the worst of the seasons record-wise. 10 wins. I mean, you're going on multiple like long losing streaks. It's brutal to watch. And if you're able, that's a long 82 games. So, I mean, it was brutal.
It really was brutal. That's probably the best way you can put it. Just winning 10 games is pretty pathetic. Going over to you, Chris, even though it wasn't very good during those times, who do you was your favorite at least to watch during those times?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, I was still a huge fan at the time, so a lot of these players I look back on, honestly, kind of fondly. But from that team specifically, I really liked Nick Stauskas. I thought he played with a little bit of flair. He was a great shooter, came out of Michigan. One of those guys, you just go back and you're like, you know what, the team wasn't very good, but that was a guy I really enjoyed watching, and yes.
Definitely. Going over to you, Ty, is there anyone like that for you for this 2015 team?
Isaiah Cannon. I mean, some of these guys that, because it was such a bad season, we gave these opportunities to some of these guys that maybe wouldn't have had a chance otherwise. And you have to cling to something during these bad times. And, guys like Isaiah Cannon, guys like Nick Stauskas, I mean, you really have to, you become invested in them because what else do you have? No,
it's true. But, I mean, like you said, because of how bad that team was, they were able to get some of these other guys some minutes. I mean, you can we've talked about how this Sixers team today is doing that, honestly, which I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. Obviously, even though the Sixers are in a tough spot right now, they're not like how they are at their 2015 season, at least for right now. But, Ty, for the Sixers going forward, how do they make sure they don't end up as 10-72 again?
I think this team is better at identifying talent now than what they were back then. I think now there being a draft lottery, knowing that you can't just tank and get the top pick, I think teams are going to try harder to win games. I mean, sometimes you get unlucky. I don't think this team will ever be as bad as what they were that year. 10-72, I believe, is the second worst record in NBA history, so I don't believe they'll be that bad again. But I don't know. This team definitely, this Sixers team that we have now is definitely much closer to that 2015 team than where I think they need to be.
Unfortunately, I agree with you there. But that is all the time we have for the Sixers. Let's move on into the Phillies. Now, there is some winning here. The 2018 season, obviously, they finished 92-70, and they beat the Rays in the World Series 4-1, which is their first major Philadelphia sports championship since 1983. I mean, just this game as a whole, as we see up there, it was Philadelphia's first major championship in a long time. So it really meant a lot to the city. I know for you guys watching it, it definitely did too. Do you want to elaborate off that, Ty?
Yeah. I think the last one before this was in the 80s for the Sixers. So, I mean, it was a pretty extended period of time before the city had seen any sports team win. I mean, I was pretty young at the time, but I mean, seeing them beat the Dodgers, who I think at the time had Manny Ramirez, great team in the Dodgers. The Dodgers are always great, but it was just an unbelievable run for the Phillies. And then we had that rain delay game in the one game in the World Series, and that was kind of held your breath for that and what was going to happen with that game. But we came back. I think we won that game, and the rest is history.
Definitely. Going over to you, Chris. What was so great about that championship team for you?
Absolutely. This team, like Ty, I was also very young, and as I look back on like my first sports memories of teams, this is the team that really sticks out for me. Guys like Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley, Howard, Hamels, just some of my all-time favorite players. So many moments from this season too. Like Ty mentioned the Dodgers, but the round before that against the Brewers, who just traded for Sabathia, and then Shane Victorino hits one of the most iconic grand slams in Phillies history. just such an amazing season, and one that I look back on very, very greatly.
Definitely. But going into that, after that Dodgers win, Cole Hamels was named MVP. What can we say about that, Chris? Amazing player.
Oh, absolutely. NLCS and World Series MVP. Really anchored that staff the entire season. He was only 24 that year, and he was one of the best pitchers in baseball, definitely the Phillies' best pitcher. Can't say enough about Hamels, all-time great Philadelphia Philly.
Definitely. Going over to Utah, who it might be Cole Hamels, but who on that team, like your favorite, or at least stood out to you?
Big fan of Ryan Howard. I mean, everybody, especially when he got like a contract extension, 5 years, 125, people were always on him about striking out, this and that, but he had one of the best 4-year spans in the history of baseball. He was hitting 40-plus home runs, over 100 RBIs every year. Obviously, after that 2011 season, he came down with an injury. It was never really the same, but he was by far like my favorite player. Just some of the most iconic home runs, the walk up, the after swing after hitting a home run, just unbelievable.
Definitely. And unfortunately, boys, it's all done talking about 2008 season. We have to move to the 2015 season. I'm sure not your favorite topic, but we still have to talk about it. They finished 63-99, the worst record in MLB that season. They missed the playoffs for the 4th straight season, and their GM, Ruben Amaro Jr., was fired. Obviously, looking back, those were not good times, obviously, for the Phils. But just looking back on it, how was it just watching it as fans, starting with you?
Brutal. I mean, I feel like that's a common, we all say like it's great during the great years and brutal during the bad years. But I think a lot of, at least in my experience, teams in this city, sometimes we have a way of like holding on to certain players. I think that's kind of what we were doing with Utley and Rollins and Howard. You hold on to these players because they mean so much to the city, and that can kind of like bring down your record, and you don't want to do that too often. So, I mean, it was bad to watch, just like every other bad season, but it has led us to the team that we have now, which is great.
Definitely. It had to happen in order to get to where we are today. That's just one way of looking at it. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today's episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. If you would please check out our socials at Sports Talk LTV on X and Instagram. Please stay tuned next week. We'll be getting back to our normal swing of things. And stay tuned because Phils are starting back up again. So stay tuned.